Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Kung Fu Talk. This is your favorite martial arts podcast. I hope so. So, before introducing our guests and starting our today's show, I want to ask you to please share, subscribe, comment, and give us a thumbs up to help us in this platform. We're also going to be on Spotify as well, not only on YouTube but Spotify. If you prefer to listen instead of watching, make sure that you follow our channel on Spotify. So today we have a special guest. We have someone with the background of Wing Chun, with the lineage of Wing Chun. He's going to share much more about his martial arts experience, about his life experience. I want to welcome Sifu James. How are you doing today?
Oh, very good. Sifu Jim is fine, though.
Okay, Sifu Jimmy. Thank you very much for joining to our show. I really appreciate having you as is an honor to have you as a guest, and I'd like to love about your martial arts journey, your Wing Chun journey.
Sure.
Yeah, just feel free to share a little bit about your martial arts experience.
Okay, well, I was pretty fortunate. I mean, I did not have a regular path like a lot of people did. When I was a very young kid, looking at your shirt, I had a poster. Is that from Enter the Dragon? I can't see lower down, but
No,
no,
yes,
picture.
yes, the picture, yes.
I had a color poster of that on my wall when I was in grade school. I had no idea who Bruce Lee was. It was just there was a magazine that school kids used to get called Dynamite Magazine. TV, music, just stuff for kids. And there was a fold-out poster, and this guy just looked so cool. Like, wow! So I put it up on my wall. Had no idea who he was, but as fate would have it, my cousin and my Sifu Eric Oram, we grew up in different parts of the country, and a few years later, he'd moved from karate to Wing Chun Kung Fu, and I moved out from Florida to LA before he did, and then when he moved out to LA, he didn't have an intention to open a kung fu school. He just wanted to keep up his own training, and as you well know, you can practice forms in mukjong by yourself, but to really keep your martial arts skills sharp, you need to have people to train with. So he asked if I'd be interested. And there are some decisions one makes in life that need to be pondered for a long time, and there's others where you just instantaneously know, yes, I would love to do that. I didn't know it would become a career trajectory, but I had the opportunity to train with somebody who I knew and trusted his entire life, and who I knew had been very deeply involved in martial arts at a high level. So why wouldn't I take advantage of that? And that's how it began.
That's amazing. If you don't mind me to ask you, where from Florida you're from?
I'm not from Florida. I was born in Detroit, Michigan.
Okay.
And I was taken against my will to the horrible state of Florida. Sorry, people who are stuck there, but it's flat, it's humid, it's boring, and can't stand it. As soon as I was able to escape, I came out to Los Angeles.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I actually love Florida. I'm from Florida, and it's beautiful. I actually, some people, I'm Miami.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was Clearwater, Dunedin, so about 30 miles outside of Tampa on the Gulf of Mexico.
Nice. That's beautiful. Yeah, they have beautiful beaches, but the weather is actually very humid. Yeah, it's hard, especially practicing. I remember when I was living there, practicing apart, it's almost impossible because the heat is just, I couldn't stand for it. You need a place with a AC or something, because otherwise it's not defense. Defense does not help you at all. But here in San Francisco, it's much more chill. You can go to the Golden Gate Park and then have a place for you to practice. Beautiful places.
And plus, going back to Bruce Lee was born there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you're in the homeland.
Exactly. Going back to your background in your lineage, what lineage of Wing Chun do you practice, and how does influence you to approach to the art?
I like that question because, as we spoke a little bit about earlier, about healthy versus unhealthy attitudes within the martial arts community. When I first started training, I didn't know I understood there was a difference between kung fu and karate, and that was about the extent of my understanding of Asian martial arts. And so I was a real zealot when I first got into it, because I'm like, okay, this is the one true Wing Chun. Everybody else is just wrong. And time will have a tendency to teach you lessons and humble you. So eventually, of course, I started training under my Sifu Eric Oram, who trained under our common ancestor, William Chung, or yes. Chung Chuk Hing. And so that was the lineage that I was brought into. And eventually, though, after I had started teaching on my own, I had run into some people who did other families of Wing Chun. And the first people who I had touched hands with that did other lineages of Wing Chun, they were more beginner students or more kind of casual, and I got a wrong impression because I was able to easily control them, and I assumed it was just that they were good examples of those different lineages, when in fairness to them, they were just casual short-time students. So it left a wrong impression with me that what I'm doing is right, what they're doing is wrong, until I had a chance to touch hands with people who did different lineages, who were experienced and were able to create difficulties for me and make me kind of question things. So over time, my approach to Wing Chun has become more like my approach to music, in that I have my foundation, right? My Sifu, and I was fortunate to have extensive direct training with my grandmaster as well, my Sigong, because he would come into town 2 or 3 times a year. I got to go on a trip with him that we'll talk about later. But my Sifu, one of the most important things I feel I learned from him was to have an open mind and to be open to learning techniques, information, and ideas from not just outside of my family, but outside of everything. Sometimes the most distant thing to Kung Fu might inspire an idea for a type of training technique. So one of the big eye-openers was I had a dear friend who's now deceased, who kind of became my second mentor, and he was very deeply into the Wang Chongyang lineage. So that has been that, plus reading every book from every Sifu I could find on Wing Chun, and just trying to explore, a bit like Bruce's approach for Jeet Kune Do, to just continually explore and refine. And it reminded me too of I'd read a story that Sifu Wang Chongyang was asked at some point, like, why don't you write a book? All of your contemporaries and juniors under Sifu Yip Man have these books out. And he thought for a while and said, I don't want to find myself disagreeing with myself 10 years from now. So, for anybody who's trained for more than a decade, you come to recognize that your point of view at any given point on your path is it's incomplete, right? It will always be incomplete, because if you're alive and you're learning, you're open to learning, you will learn new things, right? You'll have different perspectives. It doesn't mean that you jettison everything that you learned before, but you have a more mature perspective and maybe more refined. There's some things that maybe were beneficial for you at one stage of your training that are now counterproductive. And I don't go on too long, but hopefully that communicates the idea.
That's amazing. 2 things that I want to touch base is what you just said is about the lineage. I also did practice 2 other lineages, which are beautiful, the Moyat lineage and the Lomankang lineage. And what it fascinated me, it doesn't matter which lineage you practice when it comes about Wing Chun, the basics is still the same thing what we're going to talk about, the
Yeah.
Douyin, the center line and things. And it's just different perspective. And it's beautiful how to see how people, from our lineage, from Willie Chen, keep the tradition, and other lineages keep the tradition as well, keep the movements, keep, the same style. I wouldn't say modifying, but also implementing or developing new skills to make that art, that style evolving. The time goes by. I'm sure that 100 and 200 years ago, Wing Chun was not the same that we have nowadays, and probably 200 years from now, it's going to evolve as well to a new thing. I wouldn't see a new thing, but maybe a new approach or a different way of seeing things, especially with our species evolution, human evolution. We see unfortunately many wars going through, and I believe when martial arts became a thing back in the days, especially in the dynasties, were more for self-defense and for war protection, right? And I think it's beautiful to see, how was your approach, from one thing to another. I remember when it was, when I first started my first style back in 2006. The first time I heard about Wing Chun was maybe 2007.
Okay.
And I was like, oh yeah, this is a style that was created for a girl. This is not effective, And now I come to see that it's one of the most effective styles, without my respect to any other style. But when we see the effectiveness and the simplicity that makes the style actually become effective, it's amazing. You don't
Yeah.
need much thing. You don't need any fancy movement. You don't need even, without my respect to any other style that jumps and do fly kicks and stuff are beautiful. I love it. I really appreciate it, especially into movies. But when it comes about self-defense, it's amazing how we see the effectiveness of Wing Chun and your approach to the Wing Chun, and now having this mind of, wow, always evolving, always learning, open to learn. And as you say, like a human being, there's this term of being a master, but we are never mastering anything because you're always evolving. We come back to the
Mastery is
evolution
a
thing.
process. It's not a result, right? So it's for those who've studied their Greek philosophers, like Plato and his idea, the realm of ideals, right? You can get closer and closer to mastery, but the highest level martial artists or musicians or anyone who's very skilled at their craft. Well, maybe there's some exceptions, but generally speaking, those people have a humility about them, right? They're all, they're confident in their skills, but they know that, or they have a desire to refine, and maybe not something you or I would be able to perceive a difference, but there's that perpetual quest to make it better, more complete, more whole. And frankly, if you did reach a level of perfection, assuming that was possible, well, that would kind of suck, because it would be everything would be boring. Where do you go from there? There's no challenge left. So when you understand that even if you get really good, you can still get better and grow. And back to talking what you're about the changes in martial arts over the centuries. When I teach, I often make reference to Kung Fu as a language, right? It's a physical language as opposed to a spoken language. But like a language, there's going to be vocabulary and grammar. So from my model of speaking about it, what we do with the arms, whether it's defensive or offensive movements, I consider that to be the vocabulary, the words that we use. And the footwork and stances is the grammar. How do those words, how do I physically position the arms relative to my opponent to make a conversation? And if you look at the English language, we can understand each other quite well. If I'm reading a book from Mark Twain, writing in the 1880s, I can understand it, but there's going to be some words that are a little bit, I might know the word, but he uses it in a way I'm unfamiliar with. If I try to read Shakespeare, we're getting a little bit at the edge of my understanding. If you go back to Chaucer, then Middle English, I might get 2 words out of a sentence and just be kind of lost. But it's still the same language. It's grown and it's responded to the influx of different people and situations and how the language is used. Now, with physical languages, it's a little bit different because with Kung Fu or Karate or any other type of fighting system, there is an objective to it, right? It has to be functional, but this is going now to what you were talking about with simplicity. If I'm speaking to somebody, especially somebody who has English as a second or third language, I don't want to try to use all my multisyllabic words to communicate. I want to speak in short, simple sentences with little words that are direct and communicate my understanding, maybe not as eloquently as I'd like, but it gets the point across. And that to me is Wing Chun. It's simple sentences with small words that get the point across.
That's amazing how you emphasize or compare, better saying, the language with the martial arts, because it's all about adaptability at the end. We learn the forms, we learn Shilim Tao, Chun Kyu, Buji, and at the end, how you're going to apply that into not only into a fight, but also into your personal life. Because luckily, maybe you're never going to get into a fight. And I love this. Maybe we can try to say metaphor, like, the way that you express like the language in comparing. That's beautiful. You're talking about books, and I have many books, not many, maybe Phil of Willie Chung. I love it. He's amazing writing. He's an amazing writer. And I have some of his books. When I meet him, I really want an autograph or something like that, because I've learned a lot from, of course, more for my Sifu, but I think it was really, really nice the way that he expressed Wing Chun through letters and through his books. Talking about Wing Chun, how Wing Chun emphasizes directness and efficiency. How do you help your students to embody these principles both in and out of training?
I just hit them. I'll share a quick story with you about my Sifu and Grandmaster Chung. And hopefully I'll be able to, please remind me, because I might get distracted, not be able to fully tie it back. But this story I share with a lot of my students, but my Sifu, my cousin, he started training with Grandmaster Chung when he was pretty young. And at one point he was doing Bonsao Lapsao drill with Grandmaster Chung. And, Grandmaster is a wonderful man and a great teacher. But sometimes he can, when he was younger, sometimes he could get in a mood, and you just wanted to be really respectful and keep distance and don't poke the bear. But my cousin was in the position of being, in the training hall with him and touching hands, and he was just getting smacked silly. So he was starting to wonder, like, my God, did I must have broken some Confucian Chinese protocol rule without realizing it. So he kind of steps back. Excuse me, Sifu, what am I doing wrong? And Grandmaster just goes, I'm hitting you. So it was sort of Grandmaster's way of saying, you already have the tools to figure out how to avoid getting hit. Don't get hit. Sort of like teaching people to swim by throwing them in the river.
Wow.
Maybe not the best way to run a commercial school, but in a private lesson with a dedicated student, sometimes forcing somebody into a position where they have to just respond. Because Wing Chun, we can make analogies to chess where you kind of can think things through, but you cannot do that in the moment, right? This is where the Chi Sao becomes so critical, because touch reflex responses are instantaneous. There's no thought involved in that moment, right? The thought happens beforehand when you intentionally train particular types of reflexes to particular types of pressure or lack of pressure. So with Chi Sao, I've been doing some experimentation, and the regular, the Dan Chi Sao and the double arm Chi Sao is wonderful, but a student has to have a fairly established vocabulary and grammar before you can really effectively get into that. Mm-hmm. So I started trying to come up with some simple approaches of just getting the feeling of Chi Sao minus the specific arm structure. So if I had somebody here with me, I could show you, but just for example, a guy I know who's a Japanese guy speaks less English than I speak Japanese. So our communication is short and direct, but I was trying to explain to him a little bit about Wing Chun and Chi Sao. And so we'll say we're standing in front stances. So I put his Pak Sao on my elbow, and I had him close his eyes. I had him, so he's got his hands here, and the other hand like Wu Sao. My hand is here on his elbow. And I said, I'm going to touch your head, but when you think I'm going to touch your head, lift your Wu Sao to cover that upper gate. So the first couple times he wasn't getting it, so I just kind of give him a little one hand clapping in there. But then he figured it out. So when he felt my arm going away, he could tell the other hand was coming in, and he'd respond, right, and lift the hand up. Mm-hmm. And then I said, okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna kick you in the balls, and we think I'm gonna kick, pull the elbow down. So when he could feel my weight shifting back to lift the leg, he pulled the elbow down. You understand? So it's just just like two elements that he was taught, like this or that, and determine what I'm going to do by feeling what you're doing with my elbow. He knew nothing about any martial arts. He was just a human who understood the words I was saying and what I was trying to do. And I find that's a little bit easier because for myself, and I don't know about you, but when I first started Chi Sao, I was so stiff and rigid. And a big part of that is I was putting so much attention, which isn't bad, but the bad part of putting so much intention and tension into my Tan Sao or my Bon Sao was I was trying so hard to fit this form that I was not fitting it to what my training partner was doing, right? So back to language and Wing Chun, a lot of times I've heard some of the guys in Wang Sheng Lung family speak of the Silam Tao as like the alphabet for the Wing Chun language. And I like that. But if you remember as a kid, when you're learning to write the alphabet and you've got the big fat pencil and you're writing just capital letters A, B, right? Later on, you learn lowercase, and then later on, if they still teach it, you learn cursive. So the essence of the shapes of those letters are communicated, whether we're uppercase, lowercase, or cursive, but they do look different, and the cursive is fluid. So to me, the Silam Tao is sort of the idealized essence of some of the movements, whereas when we're actually using it, you have to make what you're doing fit with what your training partner, sparring partner, or person you're engaged with are doing. And one of my big lessons with that was with Sifu Eric. And there's a certain stage in training when you're still a beginner, but you now have a fundamental level of competence. Not good by any measure, but just where you can have some authenticity. And I'd gotten to the point where I could do a reasonable Pak Sao and counter punch against a jab, but we had opened up our small training group to maybe a dozen people, and some of these people had no martial arts background, no coordination, and the guy I was partnered up with was kind of like Herman Munster, throwing these kind of spazzy punches, and I'm trying to help him. I'm like, hey, that's not how you throw the punch. You need to throw the punch like this. And Sifu Eric overheard me doing this, and he kind of jumped down my throat. And I was like, no, your attacker is never wrong. Your attacker is never wrong. right? You have no control over what somebody else is going to do. His message to me was I needed to learn how to adapt my Pak Sao to this kind of crazy, wild punch, as opposed to making him throw the punch that I was used to. Because my early training was with my Sifu and another guy who was already an experienced martial artist, right? So I was sort of spoiled that every time I trained, I had guys that had excellent control, clean movements, and very precise and consistent. So every time I'd get that punch, I knew, okay, that's going to be a nice clean punch. But then you open it up to people with no background, and it forced me to rethink my understanding of something so simple as a Pak Sao.
Wow. And I love when you talk about the foundation and again and comparing to language, because for you to develop skills, reaching to a level, especially when we get to the Chi Sao, if you don't have the right skills, your Chi Sao is going to be floppy and you're going to be like really tense. That's why little by little, of course, like if you're new to Chi Sao, doesn't you're not gonna become a master right. And the point doesn't matter how many years of Wing Chun you have. You still have the training. You still need the training to get there and to work your flexibility in your what's it called, relaxation, I would say.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful because I have English as my third language, and what you have, I remember when I was trying to learn English, you don't just simply go through try to speak. I mean, even though we try, but we can't. I would say, like, comparing, like, coming to US, trying to communicate, it's like a street fighter, because you try to to live in a society and trying to have that language as your fluent language, but at the same way, you still have to go to the foundations. You still have to learn, verbs. You have to learn, everything to build you a good consistency of words and phrases, so you can actually start becoming a better, a better fluent in that specific language. Which
Right.
it's funny because, like, when you're a kid, you just simply learn and that's it. You just get things like that. But like when you're an adult or a teenager, it takes you a little bit more because you have to go through the process. But you don't realize when you're a kid, you still have to go through the process, but you normally pick things really fast. Just hear your parents and friends, brothers and sisters, siblings, or whatever. And it's beautiful that the same language aspect, when we talk about the Wing Chun and its effectiveness, it is a process too. It's not something that you just simply pick, like, right there, just
Right.
wake up tomorrow and you're just another Ip Man or anything like that. It's beautiful. Like, it's an art that makes you grow in internally and physically as well. Not saying growing in this aspect of become bulky, but your movements, the way that you're shaping yourself, like you're shaping your movements, you're shaping your postures as well.
Mhm.
Working the Ijikinoma, working the Biuma, all the stances, it gives you a good foundation, not only as intellectual human being, but also working as a good posture. Especially for people that work in computers or sitting down the whole time in the office.
Yeah.
It's complicated because you're all you every time like that, exactly. But when you go to practice, you center your line, your team, your movement, so your spine now is completely erect, and then you work through your you flow your energy through while you're practicing class. It's beautiful.
I exactly on those lines. I think actually that probably I have to imagine that every martial art has the capacity to allow that sort of growth for the practitioners. It just, Wing Chun is the one that we happen to do, but I've trained people that have been accountants or computer programmers for 15, 20 years, and their posture is reflective, of the shapes that they habitually leave their body in, right? So Wing Chun or any other sort of exercise really can be a good way to counteract that. But one of the things that I came up with early on in my training, I used to work in Hollywood at a liquor store from open to close Saturday and Sunday. And I was really bummed because, I needed the money, but, I thought, man, I'm there from 8 a.m. till 2 a.m., take a nap and do it again. When am I going to have a chance to practice over the weekend? And then, that little bing light bulb went off over my head. It wasn't a big light bulb, but, enough to see. And I realized, well, hey, I'm at a liquor store behind a counter. I'm pretty much standing up the whole time anyway. So I started just dropping into Yiji Kimyongma, neutral stance, to work the register. I'm handing somebody their cigarettes, Tom Sao, right? Get their change. And just kind of getting creative with it. It's a little silly, but, and then I extended this further that I do a lot of cooking, right? So if I'm cooking, I would lean for this, lean for that, so I could just stay put. But I'm taking my upper center out over, right? And I realized that, hey, if I only train Wing Chun posture and body physics, I guess I would say, while I'm on the mat and intentionally training Wing Chun, I'm missing out on all the other times that I'm awake and moving. So why not try to consciously construct a way of doing mundane activities in a way that reinforces what I'm trying to teach my body to do? And I share this with my students. So the kitchen exercise is a pretty easy one because you're in a kitchen, it's pretty small usually. Mm-hmm. And so my instruction to them is, if there's anything you need, a spatula, pot, or pan, if you can't reach it without leaning, move your whole body with balance to that thing, right? So that your head is over your center and everything is within this nice little Wing Chun zone, right? It's not outside of that zone, because this helps reinforce movement with a posture that allows Wing Chun to be at its optimal structure, right? Because Wing Chun structure is very specific, right? If I start leaning forward, it can still work, and there's a lot of good fighters that have a kind of a forward posture, but there is an inherent balance structure that's forward of your center and can be exploited.
Wow, that's amazing. Something that I have to say about what you just said is many find excuses to practice, but you actually found a way to actually develop new skills, using your training during, your work time. It's funny because through my entire life, sometimes I go to the gym, I just I see a pole, I'm doing my lift to over there to the, I forgot the machine. And then I see a pole, okay, so let me just practice my tan sao, my bon sao. And then people are just looking at you you're taking a rest of 15 seconds, maybe, 30 seconds, 45, but you're actually doing your movements. Okay, so let me work my center line now. It's funny because I've seen a video the other day, somebody posted on Instagram, and there was a guy in the street. I don't know what he was doing, some maybe Hongar hand movements. Okay. And then the subtitle was that there's a wushu practitioners walking by. that's how you know that the guy practices kung fu, because his mind is another place. And that's beautiful because people, they waste their time with so many things, and then instead of just practicing. And I'm addicted to practice. Normally I practice almost 3 hours per day after when I have my free time. But I tell my students, if you only use the time that you have it in class to practice, you're never going to develop a new skill. This is a place that you have to actually bring your questions. Your training is actually at home. This is just a review for what actually you've been practicing at home. Because otherwise, 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, it's nothing. Maybe there's students that only come to class maybe once a week. And, being practicing only once or twice a week, or 3 times a week is actually not enough. If you want to actually reach to a high level skill martial artist, you have to practice, not only, coming to class and just do your 1 hour and a half review or anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that, the Bruce Lee inspiration kind of helped me with that too. Cause sometimes Yeah, I love to do gardening, landscaping, and kind of turning my yard into kind of a Zen garden. But even stuff as simple as like picking weeds or whatever, I I've got high fences, so I don't have to really worry about people looking at me. But I don't care if they do anyway. But I try to like just have fun with it, like like watching Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon when he's like sneaking out and get the cobra and stuff, and thought, like, how would Bruce Lee do this? And so just, it's a little silly, but it gives you an image to work with of somebody who had masterful control over his body. And, if I'm using the garden hose, but also using that for stretching and kind of, I don't know, mock Tai Chi with a hose. It just, because there's so many images of water in martial arts, particularly in Kung Fu, like to flow like water. So I've got this hose that literally has flowing water, and I'm taking a wide stance and, engaging with that to reinforce everything I've been trying to learn for so long. So just trying to, like, just about any physical exercise or activity, I should say, that one's doing can be made into a Kung Fu exercise. Driving, sitting down, boom, hey, that steering wheel is a lot like so if you drive with Fuxaos, right, and then you can lop, pop to turn, lop, pop to turn the other way. And it makes it a little bit more fun, but again, you're finding creative ways to augment your training. It doesn't supplement focused, like, okay, now I'm going to go work on forms, I'm going to do some chi sao with my friend, or I'm going to work my mukjong, but it does reinforce those things for you, right? So I'm trying to learn Japanese. My wife's from Japan, but she never practices with me. She'll just correct me when I say something wrong. But lately I'm in a position where I'm dealing with a lot of Japanese people who don't have much English. And I don't have much Japanese, but I'm practicing on a more regular basis now. So hopefully that will continue. And I would love to be able to be fluent, but my brain is very anchored in English grammar, and Japanese grammar is another animal entirely. So I'll always sound like a gaijin, but my pronunciation is good.
That's amazing. One thing that I just want to conclude with this is actually when you said silly, right? I would say that my Sifu used to say every opportunity is an opportunity to practice and an opportunity to learn if you have your eyes and your ears open. So which means that it's just there, like every single opportunity, every single moment of our life, it's actually an opportunity for us not necessarily physically practicing by itself, but you can mentally practice it. I was one time I was teaching this form to my student, right? From my it's called Wing Chun, and it took me approximately a week to learn that form. He learned it in one day, and I was like, "How did you learn that? Like, it's so fast. Like, of course, you have to polish, you have to fix movements and stuff. Like, I don't know, Sifu, like, I was just like doing my things, and then I just close my mind and I start meditating on the movements when I'm not doing anything. Like, if I have to have my mom doing this, if I have to have my dad do that, I just stop and just like start to memorize. I went to sleep, and then I go through the whole form again in my mind, and the next morning I just went to practice, and that's how I did it. I was like, wow, that's impressive. Like, and it's beautiful how different people find different ways to actually achieve certain levels in martial arts. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Going to the next question, how has Wing Chun, in your opinion, of course, how has Wing Chun evolved over years? And do you feel that the art has adapted well to the modern times? Like we see, like, for example, after the movie of Ip Man, like many people just like, okay, so I know Wing Chun, I want to learn Wing Chun. That's one of the things, like when I watched the movie, I was like, wow, that's Wing Chun. And then after looking Wing Chun lineage, of course, YouTube was starting back in 2008. And it was funny because I've seen, like, that was the first time that I've seen my Sifu doing, performance online. And I was like, wow, but I came from a very poor family when I was living in Brazil. was like, going to Paris to practice with this guy. Like, how am I going to do that? But the destiny and time and brought us together, and it's beautiful. Like, how do you think the Wing Chun evolved through the years, and if it was adapted to the modern times?
Well, it's hard for me to really speak too authoritatively on that because I've only been alive, for a certain amount of time, and only been aware of Wing Chun for an even shorter period of time. So I don't, apart from those short little clips of Ip Man demonstrating stuff like just a couple weeks before his own death, we don't really have footage of what I would love to see how did Ip Man look in his prime? Like, to see him in a Hong Kong street fight would be amazing. But, one of the things that was always infuriating to me was YouTube Wing Chun versus X, Y, or Z. Oh, yeah. And somebody who was clearly not a very experienced fighter getting in a ring with somebody who was an experienced fighter and standing with a very rigid stance and promptly getting put down on the floor and just not creating a very good image for Wing Chun. Wing Chun, I think, is a fantastic martial art, but in terms of what's most popular in competitive sports, MMA and UFC style fighting, ground fighting is a huge component to that. And most of the Wing Chun people that I've known, their attitude towards that is generally, I'm not going to let them take me to the ground, and I'm going to do everything to avoid that. And I can understand that. I don't particularly like being on the ground, but I have to recognize the practical reality that even somebody who's marginally skilled, just, some big high school wrestler, if they're determined, gravity is on their side, and you are very likely to end up on the ground. And if your whole strategy is I'm not going to the ground, then you're really doing yourself a disservice by ignoring the fact that other people do have those skills. There is some hope. I hope I'm not getting the guy's name wrong, but there was a British Wing Chun Sifu. I think it's Sifu Alan Orr, O-R-R. I might be a little bit off on his name, but I'd read his book, and he is kind of a Wing Chun explorer. He had trained with Grandmaster Chung and probably a dozen or more other Sifus of various lineages. And he runs well, I haven't kept up with him recently, but last I heard he was running a fight team out of England where they all train. He's also got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he's just a well-rounded fighter we're living at a time where if you're really interested in various martial arts and competitive fighting, there's a lot of people who are very good at teaching and training a lot of different styles of fighting. And you can kind of, I can get some ground skills from these wrestling guys and then these jiu-jitsu guys, some in-close techniques from Wing Chun, some other stuff from boxing and Muay Thai. So his guys are doing Wing Chun, but not exclusively Wing Chun. So Wing Chun is an infusion into what they're doing. And I think Wing Chun I hate to use the word as a pure art, but as Wing Chun is just its own thing where we're doing the forms, we're practicing the Chi Sao, we're working the Mukjong. I think that is and should always be a thing. But to keep it really vital and relevant to a continually developing fight community, I think it would be really well served to work alongside of other martial arts. So that for myself, I have no interest in being a competitive fighter, but Sifu Dennis, at the White Tiger School where I teach, he also does wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and teaches MMA guys. And I've gotten out and rolled around with some of the BJJ guys, and that was the only time in my life I ever got stitches. You probably can't see it, but there's.
Oh wow!
It was really silly. I was a very casual kind of rolling on the mat with the gis on, and I did a kind of a backwards somersault. My training partner's knee and shin just very lightly grazed here. It didn't feel like anything, but when he stood up, he's like, "Oh, Sifu, you're bleeding." So it was 5 stitches, boom.
Ooh.
I know, but anyway, my point is, I like when I was playing with the jujitsu guys. What was really interesting was, when you're doing drills where you're both standing up and trying to take the other person to the ground, Chi Sao was magnificent in frustrating the hell out of them. I mean, they're going to get me. They're 20 years younger and they've got energy, but I'm going to make it hell for them to get me there. And once we're down there, I'm going to do what my Sifu taught me, and I'm going to cheat. But yeah, so I think though, I like to train younger people who are into wanting to learn to fight, competitively. But my advice to them would be to study everything you can, particularly the different food groups, I guess you'd say, right? So Wing Chun, I wouldn't say do Wing Chun exclusively for your upright game, but do it to augment it, especially when you can get in close, because the the magic of Chi Sao, when you're in really close, it really brings it alive. And another Grandmaster Chung story. Once I had gotten to a point where he would use me in seminars to help demonstrate techniques. Mm-hmm. It was a big moment for me. Like, now Grandmaster is going to hit me after I did the technique. So he had his Pak Sao still on my elbow after he'd finished whatever technique, and he's answering questions from the class. And I thought to myself, I wonder what would happen if I just wiggle my finger, so because he's got his hand on here, and I just did a quick little wiggle of my finger, and without breaking his answer to the students, he sensed that and just reflexively tugged my elbow and put a palm in my face. It was great. But that's Chi Sao.
It's impressive how adaptability plays a big role into martial arts. I've seen a lot of people, when he talks about tradition and, oh no, because my lineage, especially into Wing Chun, people, oh, my lineage is more pure, like as you said, than the others because of this, because we don't mix with other things. But when it comes about real application things, like as you say, you had experience practicing some jiu-jitsu. If you see like Sifu James, he's a freaking machine. Like the guy, he knows jiu-jitsu, wrestling, kung fu, and so much more, and military experience as well. And I think it gives you a big advantage against other people that actually doesn't have that much. I think not to praise yourself, but actually to make safeguard yourself against any attacker or anything in a self-defense combination. Like as you said, like Sifu de Debedar, if you see like his Wing Chun, his not his mix, because he does some drills when started with the Pak Sao and then bring people on the floor, and then does some jiu-jitsu and I'm liking it, and I feel like very impressive. One time, he almost broke my wrist. It was very impressive in a demonstration. I think this was one of the most painful situations, because I feel like if he actually twisted like 1 inch or maybe half of an inch, that would be a disaster. But like, he's very experienced. He's been practicing for so many decades. But it's beautiful how you implement not. I would say implement, but used to not develop as well. But I would say the word practice and get some experience from other system and actually implementing yourself to be not a complete, but actually be more effective. I would say, because I think every art in their sense, they are complete. Doesn't matter. Doesn't mean that only because you jiu-jitsu maybe you don't do punches and kicks, but you actually can be very effective in what you have. And on what you practice doesn't mean that it's not a complete art, But when it comes about competition, of course, like you see, like UFC, the way that they mold, the way that they shape the competition, it's actually mixed many different things. If I'm not mistaken, I'm a big UFC fighter. I like to watch, but I don't remember to ever seen a martial artist on that sense of competition that only knows one style. And when I see people, because this is not on UFC, this is not effective, but there's no martial artists in that aspect that only knows only Muay Thai or only Jiu-Jitsu. They always mix with something else, either Jiu-Jitsu with the kickboxing, with the Muay Thai, or with the MMA itself. and I think there's we can jump to the next question. Is like a big misunderstood when it comes about knowing the effectiveness of the martial arts. On your opinion, what do you think would be the most misunderstood aspect of Wing Chun and the martial arts community?
Um, well, again, hard for me to estimate, but I guess it would really just be about the perception of Wing Chun getting unfairly judged by inexperienced practitioners displaying their inexperience in YouTube videos and Instagrams, right? So, and ultimately, fighting is really much more about any a particular individual and their determination more than whatever their style or system is, right? So, a completely untrained person with a healthy body and a large amount of rage might defeat, like, if there's a father who sees his child being abused, look out, right? So, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't really have a particular answer for that, but I just say that anybody who really wants to be a good fighter would be well advised to, start somewhere. Wing Chun is a good thing to learn, but if your intention is to be a competitive fighter, yes, learn Wing Chun. Yes, learn boxing. Yes, learn jiu-jitsu. Yes, learn wrestling. And definitely spar with people who do other things than what you do, because this was a big deficiency in my own personal training diet for a long time, and it was just circumstantial because everybody I knew who was into martial arts was doing Wing Chun with my Sifu. So it's Wing Chun versus Wing Chun, and that can be, it's a necessary thing to practice with people of your own style. But if it's limited, confined to that, then the instant you encounter somebody who's using other types of techniques, it's unfamiliar to you.
Of course. Something that I want to comment about what you said, also sharing maybe some experience. I remember when I used to practice from another lineage, they had a saying of Wing Chun is not meant for fighting, and you don't need to spar if you like, because when you need Wing Chun is gonna be there. And as I was already a Sandai instructor, and I know that just punching bags you're not gonna get anywhere in Sandai. Just doing a mukjang with with someone, like I have my mukjang here with something that's not physically, I would say, is just a little idea of how movements are gonna be thrown. But when you don't know what's going to come against you, like, it's a different thing, because it can be a roundhouse kick, it can be a back fist, it can be so many different things. And I was a little bit frustrated, because I was like how people are going to develop new skills. Not necessarily need to go to different schools and then be challenging people. Okay, so I want to fight you just to test my Wing Chun. This is not the best approach. But like, if you don't have maybe friends, or maybe signing up for other schools styles, just to learn a different method, so you can gather information on our big computer, which is our brain, and then develop your application system, you're never going to go anywhere. Like, I like to say that, like, for you to ride a bike, just watching somebody riding a bike or just being on top of the bike is not going to help you anywhere. Like, to be a pilot is the same thing. Just flying in a simulator, it gives you some perception, but it's not going to give you the perfect experience if you get behind the big controller and then just actually fly in a real airplane. Is the same thing. And when I see those things about misunderstanding of people thinking that fighting is like a movie, that you, like, if you watch Ip Man for the first movie, when he goes into that place and then he fights against 10 karate masters, and then he like all 10 very well skills, he just beat them up without getting one single punch. you're gonna be frustrated because in the Street Fighter it's different. You know, somebody's trying to hurt you, and he's gonna throw as many as they want. They don't care who you are, what background you're coming from. They just want to, take what it's from you or just hurting you. And I feel frustrated when I see people like misunderstanding the system. I mean, it's not about. I feel that the system, the style by it's maybe just a small percentage would be the self-defense aspect. We have so much more the culture, the philosophy, and so much more into Wing Chun.
Yeah.
But not misunderstand, but by misunderstanding the application, I feel it hurts because that's what we see online: MMA against Wing Chun, kickboxing
Yeah.
against Wing Chun, and unfortunately, people getting very well beat up because they misunderstand the aspect of real application and practicing.
Right. And, in fairness, I think most of the people that I've ever trained, most of them had no intention of doing competitive fighting. And most of them will probably never, ever get in a street fight. But I do want them to have some realistic skills that could help them if they were in that situation. But bigger picture, as a human being, you use your body every day, and Wing Chun is an excellent way of kind of refining your ability to move and be efficient and effective with your body. Because like you were talking about earlier with, people whose jobs are sedentary, and if you start compressing your body this way, it leads to all manner of health problems in the long run. And it doesn't look cool. But back to the idea of how did you say it? Like that you don't have to fight because your chi cell will be there or whatever. That's
that's what he used to say.
That's like, just silly, right?
It's like your Wing Chun is gonna be there when you need it.
No, it won't. It's in music, if you play an instrument, then I've been playing music for a very, very long time, longer than I've been doing Wing Chun. But it was a real eye-opener for me when I had learned some songs, and I was in high school, and I was going to go audition for a band, and these guys were out of high school, so it was like, cool, man. But stuff I could play just fine at home, playing along with records back when there was records. I got in there, and there was part of it was nerves, but playing music with other musicians is a lot different than sitting in your bedroom playing along with the recording, right? And it's the same mechanics, but the context is different, and that will affect you. And same thing, if you've learned your forms, you've learned some mukjong, you've learned some chi sao, maybe you can even do some light sparring, Wing Chun versus Wing Chun, or whatever your family is versus your own family. As soon as you go to touch hands with somebody who does something different, there's some crossover, but it's a completely different situation. And if you haven't exposed yourself to this, to becoming comfortable with unfamiliarity, then you're at a distinct disadvantage. Like the first time I did, I started teaching at White Tiger School and did some sparring with Sifu Dennis. Some real huge eye openers because I'm 6'3". Sifu Dennis is a pretty big guy too, and he weighs more than me, and he hits hard. But we put on the 16-ounce boxing gloves, and I had really no experience of playing with gloves on. So I'm hitting, but I don't feel it. So I'm like, wow, there's no power. So I start hitting harder. And then Sifu Dennis gives me a quick little pop. He's like, you're hitting kind of hard, Sifu Jim. I'm like, really? I didn't feel like I was. But so that kind of woke me up there. But the other thing was I was just going straight Wing Chun, like my regular guard. But he already knew my game. I'm guarding the center line. So he's not doing these sun fist straight line attacks. He's coming around and just lighting me up with that overhand right. And it was a real eye opener because form follows function, right? Wheels are round for a reason, right? So Wing Chun guard came from a particular place and time. And this is a little bit back to your evolution of Wing Chun question. Okay. So if I was a fighter in China 300 years ago, if I was fighting a skilled fighter, there's a strong possibility that their principal arsenal is something akin to this, right? So this makes a sensible defense against that because you're closing off that path. But if your fighter that you're dealing with is got more of a boxing Muay Thai arsenal, it's not that effective, right? I mean, you can still do whatever you need to do, but if I was to be in a street encounter, or if I'm sparring with somebody and we're not trying to be strict Wing Chun, I adapt my guard to what's going on. So yeah, I'll still keep the ambidexterity left or right. I don't care. But this regular centerline guarding, I bring it in and over a little bit, right? So now I'm still having access to the same principles and tools, but I can cover the lines that are more likely to be taken by a modern fighter in America in the 21st century, right? I can still come in and do whatever else I'm going to do. And once I get into contact range and can start engaging Chi Sao, then I can really open up. But in the meanwhile, like regular Wing Chun footwork when I'm at a distance it's like calling somebody on a cell phone when you're right next to me. I don't need to do that. If I'm 10 feet away, I'm going to be Muhammad Ali and kind of just moving around and trying to read your movement and see how do you move, how do you respond. Once I get in closer, then I'll drop the center a little bit and, yeah, I've rambled too much there, but I hope you get my point.
No, absolutely. I completely understood. I think the experience is very important. That's why, unfortunately, we see that the many kind of videos shameless on people that unfortunately doesn't have that much experience and on internet. And one of the things that I find that fascinated me, especially going to this lineage of Wing Chun, coming from other lineages, without my respect to other people that have think differently, of course, but the effectiveness of experiment different things. When I say experiment different things into Wing Chun and adapting to your Wing Chun, some other people that I've heard it was like, this is not part of the Wing Chun. This is this is gonna hurt the tradition. Like, but the thing is, like, how. I think it's gonna hurt more, if I have a hook on my face, because if I just keep on doing, if I actually only do, like, of course, like if I only see people coming through my center line, just playing Chi Sao against Chi Sao or Wing Chun against Wing Chun, and not having the experience of having, as I said, a roundhouse kick or a people working with different arts, working at different angles, which pretty much is gonna be like, somebody trying to, if you're in a bar or if you're in the street, somebody's gonna try to rob you. He's not gonna, be on his Wing Chun stance and doing like going through the center line. He's probably gonna be swinging punch around, and if you don't know how to do things and how to protect the things, it's not going to be effective.
Wing Chun should not be static, right? It's not a museum piece that's frozen in time. I try to find a balance between teaching and training the things that I learned is the foundation of the art. But again, like English language, or all languages really, they develop and adapt to the times, circumstances, and people that are using them. So for Wing Chun to remain vital, and it just needs to be cognizant of what's going on in the world of martial arts and fighting, right? It doesn't mean that everybody who studies Wing Chun should also involve themselves in all manner of MMA stuff. But if your intention is to become a competitive fighter, then you'd be a fool not to do that. You wouldn't be a fighter at all. You'd be losing pretty consistently if all you had was just basic Wing Chun and no ability to do anything once you got taken to the ground, right? So yeah, if you have all these different tools that you can avail yourself of, why wouldn't you?
Exactly. Going through this, what would be in your opinion, the key principles or concepts in Wing Chun that every practitioner would understand?
Well, yeah, I don't know. just key fundamental things. Balance, right? Your own physical balance, but balance is a bigger word than just how your body is leaning or not leaning. Balance is about your mind, your breathing, your heart, right? There was a wonderful Bruce Lee line. You don't have to embrace Taoist philosophy to learn Wing Chun, but to study it, to me, it makes a richer experience. But Bruce was talking about, I think the quote was something like, whether you are in a fight for your life or having a cup of tea with your friend, your mind should be the same, right? So Taoist philosophy tends to speak sometimes in hyperbolically, kind of exaggeration so that they can make the point. But the idea of having a cup of tea with your friend and it's relaxed, and then somebody's in a fight for their life, this is two different things. So, I don't think your mind could literally be the same, but to me, the point I take from this is to the degree that you can keep that relaxed, focused mindset of I'm relaxing and having some tea with my friend. If you can keep that while you're in a strenuous situation, whether it's a fight or just a tense situation that's not necessarily physical, this is going to be better for you, right? When your heart rate goes up, when your breathing gets shallow, you lose access to your fine motor skills. Your thinking becomes more black and white, right? The more you stay relaxed, the more you have access to fine motor skills, the more your mind can think a little bit more broadly and abstractly. So it's, to me, that's kind of an interesting thing about Krav Maga is their starting point is understanding that the person using it is not going to have access to their fine motor skills. So they have all those, big fight or flight gross motor skill techniques, which is an ingenious starting point for what I would not consider a martial art, but a combat system. But there's a reason why meditation and breathing exercises are so integral to karate and kung fu, is so much refined fine motor skill is necessary to execute it, that meditation helps you attain that equilibrium internally that allows you to do the physical things. So balance, I guess, would be the answer to your question, but balance in its broadest interpretation.
There's a very nice quote I also have on my website. I read into this book was balance is not only the key of standing, but is also the key of life, because everything has to be balanced, either physical things or emotional things. If you're too angry, it's really bad. If you're too calm and somebody's going to attack you, like, you're not going to have the right flexibility, the right reflex to respond against anything. So I think that's a perfect answer, because I was thinking about maybe center line or something about like relaxation, but I think your answer was actually perfect. And I have to agree with you 100% because a balance would be a very broad thing that actually covers the whole I would say the whole Wing Chun aspect, especially like what we're going to talk about now, the open hand forms. How do you approach teaching the empty hand forms, the Shilim Tao, Chum Kyu, and Biu Ji?
Well, pretty much the way I was taught, like monkey see, monkey do. Right? So I find I'll do a couple different things, but I think one of the best things is just say nothing, do it slowly. Sometimes I'll exaggerate the movements a little bit so it's more visible what I'm trying to get across. But just the learning of the forms. I'll make another music analogy with this. It's like if I'm learning a piece of classical music, right? If I'm learning I'm going to pull it out just because it's here. So let's say Beethoven, right? So Moonlight Sonata is already written. I'm not going to be taking credit for it. But if I want to learn that piece of music and really perform it with some passion, with some feeling, to communicate and connect with people, memorization of it is the first step. right? So once somebody learns the Silam Tao, like the student that you mentioned who had learned a form in a pretty short period of time, that's an excellent first step. That's the first hurdle. But to really get inside the form requires years of focused repetitions, and also, practicing and discovering how do these little simple things that I'm doing over and over again, how there's a multitude of ways in which every single movement can be used. And I still haven't exhausted discovering them. And I think probably in your own practice, maybe you've had this experience as well. Like there's just a simple movement that you've been doing for years, but something happens in a sparring situation where you accidentally use that movement in a way you never had before, and it works. And you're like, wow, that's cool. Like for me, when we're bringing the Wu Sao back in Silam Tao, to me, that was always just kind of boring. Like, that's the guard, it's the protecting hand, and I'm bringing it back. And but I'd had an occasion where somebody threw a punch and it kind of got through the front guard, and I kind of pulled my Wu Sao back and trapped their fist against my chest, rolled with it, did kind of Bon Sao against behind their elbow, and it was just spontaneous. But now I use that all the time. I never really would have thought of the Wu Sao as being an excellent offensive tool, but under a circumstance that came out of the blue, and being balanced, tuned into what was going on, and open, I just let reflexes take their course, and I didn't think my way through it until afterwards, where I could kind of analyze it, and wow, that's that's kind of cool. So being open to a sense of discovery and not being afraid of making a mistake, right? Because we are all humans, and I don't care how long you've practiced, you are going to make some mistakes, right? Any given day, you might be better at 4:00 in the afternoon than you are at 2 at night, or the reverse for me. But you will learn more from your mistakes than you learn from your victories, or from the things that go well. So I try to encourage students learning the forms, make as many mistakes as you can. Just keep going. You will. That is the process of learning.
Now that we spoke about the three first forms, the open hands, we're not going to go through the whole syllabus of Wing Chun, but going to the wooden dummy, how does the wooden dummy, the Mukjong, enhance a practitioner's skills, on your opinion?
Well, my opinion is I think there's going to be some probably disagreement with me on this point, but my perspective, and this is just my perspective, so if somebody has a different point of view, I'm not going to dispute it. But my feeling about the Mukjong is that its principal purpose is not for conditioning, right? I see a lot of guys that, and I got to admit, it's fun. It sounds so cool, and it's really satisfying. But to me, the arm conditioning, I would consider that a peripheral benefit, and I don't make my main focus of Mukjong training into hitting it hard. To me, I go quite the opposite, and my Sifu talked about it like kind of adjacent to Chi Sao. Now, obviously, the dummy doesn't move, but the arms have some play within their slots that you can feel and respond to. Mm-hmm. But one of the big things for me was my wife and I used to live in a house that I had my dummy set up outside. Directly next to us was an 8-foot fence. Pardon me, a quick sip of water. On the other side of the fence, the neighbor would keep dogs, and I would like to practice. I'd play some music out in the back music room. And it's like 2 a.m. and I want to play, the dummy is between the practice room and the house. So I'm like, okay, put the guitar down. I'm going to hit the dummy. And I start hitting the dummy. The dogs start barking. God, I'm not going to stop. So what it forced me to do was I had to start going really light on the dummy so that the decibel level stayed at a point that didn't invoke the dog's barking. But the hidden benefit of that was the delicacy and refinement of my movement that I learned from being able to go through all that stuff with a very, very light touch. And particularly for guys, this can be very challenging to do martial movements with a light touch, because when I translated that back into working with live people, it was astonishing just how effective a light touch can be. Now, there are times when you definitely need to put more force, more yang energy into something, but there's so much power in yin that inherently goes unobserved by most guys, because that's just not how we're wired. We have to learn that skill, and that's why, the whole mythical history of Wing Chun being developed by a woman. Now, as far as that story goes, I've done extensive research. There's a very good Wing Chun history book about the origins of Wing Chun, and I think there's several other styles of Kung Fu that have an identical or very similar origin story. So my perspective on this is I'm resigned to the fact that I will never know the actual historical truth of the origins of the founding of Wing Chun. That being said, the legend that we have, even if it is not historically true, it's useful and insightful, because if you want to think about what would a martial art be like that was developed by women, right? So how would a woman fight? She's not going to be reliant on brute strength and just clashing head on. It's going to be more about positioning, physics, finesse, these sorts of things. So true or not doesn't matter. I don't care. I think that story serves a valuable purpose in giving us a way to think about the martial art.
Couple of things. I was talking to with this podcast on Portuguese with a Wing Chun master as well, from other lineage, and he was very frustrated when he was talking about the Wing Chun. I mean, people, they like to show off. And when they show off and doing everything so fast and so hard on the internet, they miss the most principal things, which is applying every single movement, every single part of the forms into details. Who doesn't have, people that does not understand, like, oh, that's so cool. But for Wing Chun practitioners, it's like, this guy looked like a fool. He just missed, his center line. His elbow is too out instead of being in. And it's funny because that's again, like in a scenario where you're trying to show off for people that does not understand, doesn't make it any sense what you're doing. But actually for professional people that understands that, you look like a fool. And going back to what you just said regarding the legends, I find fascinating because I've seen like people on internet, Reddit, forums, like arguing about like if it's Wing Chun was like, oh yeah, no, this does not exist because so and so and so and so, and then no, it exists because my Sifu said this, and so many legends. So it's like, wow. And then what you just said is very important, because the message from behind what the story or the legend says is actually what really matters, instead of just because we don't have proof, and maybe we're never going to have any factual document that's going to be like a birth certificate, like saying, okay, Wing Chun was like this, and that. But the message behind it's what actually it's the most important. People are so superficial, looking for application for this, for that, how it was born, for the facts, and forget about the message, the philosophy behind. I was looking into the other day, searching about the five elders and the similarity into movements from Wing Chun, from Bak Hi Kyun, which is the white crane, and Bak Fu Pai and Bak Mei Pai. You see so much into one style into the other style that you could say that, like, maybe if the legend was true, maybe Bak Mei taught Nick Mui, and maybe Nick Mui taught Bak Mei a couple of things, maybe they exchanged things, but you don't know. And people are just so much arguing into so I would say miserable things that it shouldn't be this way. I understand like having different point of views. It's beautiful, you have your understanding of things and I have my understanding, and then we come back to a conclusion. But when it comes about to extreme things, when I'm arguing with you because I think differently, I think that's not healthy at all.
Yeah, because there's some things we just have to resign ourselves to accepting that there's likely no way that we can ever have the answer to some of these questions, particularly if you don't speak and read Mandarin, right? If you don't read and speak Chinese, you're limited to English language sources, which are themselves translations from, but one thing that's very eye-opening and interesting for me was I had never heard of Bok Fu Pai or White Tiger Kung Fu before I met Sifu Dennis and started teaching out of their school. But they have similar legends coming from the Southern Shaolin Temple, but there's also a lot of other similarities. So when I have incoming students or students, White Tiger students that want to join in and take some of my classes in Wing Chun, I explain it using the language analogies that Wing Chun and Bok Fu Pai are very similar in the same way as the Spanish and Italian languages are very similar, right? They both have that ancestral Latin root. So if you speak Spanish, you can go to Italy and, you're not going to be fluent, but you're going to have a general comprehension of what's being talked about, and it won't be too far from home. And similarly, Wing Chun and Bok Fu Pai, I noticed there's a lot of the same names of movements. There's a Tan Sao, there's a Pak Sao, there's a Lap Sao, there's a Muk Jong. The form is considerably different, but one of the Bok Fu Pai instructors, when I first started training, was showing me one of the little tiger forms, and he did a sun fist, and then he's like, okay, then you grab and you punch. And it was another light bulb thing, because I was like, wait a minute, that's the beginning of Silam Tao. There's a punch, hewn, and then a grab. But until that moment, I had always conceived of it, this is a thing, this is step one. Then I do that same thing over here, but I had never connected this and that. And so when linguists study different languages, they're able to postulate that because there's words in Sanskrit that also have cognates in Latin and in a lot of other European languages, that there was probably a group or family of languages that they call Indo-European that pre-existed our modern languages, but from which we still have echoes or remnants of those words. So learning a bit about Bok Fu Pai has deepened my understanding of Wing Chun in the same way that an English speaker studying Latin can get more insight into some of the words. So, it's be open to learning no matter what the source is.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how one style can connect to other style and be incomplete your understanding into these arts. Like I remember when before practicing Shuai Jiao, I was like, oh yeah, I don't like much wrestling kind of thing. But after learning, I started looking to every single form of my systems, and I started seeing like different answers that maybe the way that I was thinking or the way that I was taught wouldn't make it any sense. But after learning, another style, Chinese style, I could see how things connected. Like it's impossible for you to see like some of the forms into maybe Hungar, Cholifa, and not having the takedowns from Shuai Jiao. I remember one time I went in 2018 to this tournament in Coral Springs in Florida, and they had a workshop. That was my second approach to Shuai Jiao, and one of the instructors said, so he made one of the guys perform like the beginning of the form, and then he was like, oh, this movement that you just did, this is a takedown for this on Shuai Jiao. That movement that you just did is another takedown from another Shuai Jiao application. And it's like you see how each style connects and make the difference on the understanding when it comes about complete your art and I wouldn't say complete your art, but developing new skills and
Or
actually
augment the
make more.
art, yes. Yeah.
Exactly, that's the
Expand
perfect
it.
way.
Yeah,
Expand, exactly.
because can it ever really be complete?
Mhm.
Because there's always going to be something new coming along.
Wing Chun has a strong focus on close range combat. How do you train students to apply in a real world scenario?
You hit them. There was one of my old students was a Hmong, HMONG, people from like Laos, Cambodia area. There was a large Hmong population that were helpful for the United States during the Vietnam War, and a lot of them got relocated to America. So one of my friends was the descendant of those folks. So he grew up, I think, in Wisconsin, and his uncle was a Sifu. And so he and all his cousins every day after school were training with Sifu uncle. But my friend knew that his uncle knew Wing Chun, and he kept pestering him to learn Wing Chun. So his uncle one day finally said, "Okay, you want to learn Wing Chun?" And sent him into a broom closet, turned off the light, closed the door, and started hitting him. But yeah, a little more friendly answer to it is just understanding about distance and letting them experience what it's like if I'm doing more of a kind of a boxing approach of I'm tall and I've got long limbs, so I can stay at a distance and do that. But when I get in tight, that's where I now feel most at home, and they experience the difference of what it feels like when you're in that Wing Chun distance versus outside of it. It does take a while to get comfortable with it, and that's why it's important to train with people that you trust, that can be respectful of different people. Have different levels of contact that they're okay with. Some people are freaked out by a little tap. Others just get a big smile on their face, right? I see you're one of them.
Exactly.
Me too. But yeah, so it's just, each person you got to kind of take it as an individual. They intellectually understand that this is where it's supposed to be, but they might not physically be comfortable with it. And if they stick with it, eventually they'll get it. So if they don't get it right away, I'm not too worried. Just keep training. And if you do keep training long enough, you will start digesting and adapting to it. So I'm sorry I don't have a more specific linear approach to how to do that, but just time and pressure.
No, absolutely. And how do you see the future of Wing Chun in the modern martial arts world or society? How do you think it's going to be the future of Wing Chun, in your opinion, of course?
Well, I mean, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about Wing Chun becoming a facet of a well-trained fighter. There's a lot of fantastic fighters who probably have zero knowledge of Wing Chun, and that's fine. But I would like to see more skilled fighters that do, have a side dish of of Wing Chun to augment their training, because I think the in close upright fighting that Wing Chun excels at could be a really valuable addition to somebody's toolbox. So that's where I'd like to see that part of it going. But more broadly speaking, a very small percentage of the population is ever going to be competitive fighters. I would like to see Wing Chun continue to be a thing that's taught, that again, back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier, just like you're a human, you have a body, here's a good way to train yourself to use your body. I talk about Wing Chun as fighting with your skeleton more than with your muscles, right? So it doesn't hurt to be strong, but in Wing Chun, sometimes if I'm training like very big, strong guys, they've got so much raw strength that they rely upon that rather than developing and refining skills. So having, I don't know, maybe you've had this yourself, or students, like after they've trained for a while and they start to get some reflexes and they come in all excited about being at a grocery store and something fell off a shelf and they caught it with a spontaneous tonsao. You know, I live for those stories.
That's amazing. Sifu Jim, I want to thank you very much for taking your time for your participation. It was well, how would I say? It was a lesson. Actually, it was a kung fu lesson, a Wing Chun lesson. I appreciate for your honorable talk, and I just want to make sure that if you want to say anything, if you want to give any final words before we end our show.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Sifu Ronald. That's been wonderful chatting with you. And for anyone who's listening, give Wing Chun a chance. If somebody's talking bad about it, tells me generally they probably don't really know too much about it. And, if you want to just ignore it, that's fine too. I obla di, obla da, life goes on. But for those who have a desire to learn about it, there's a lot of really excellent Wing Chun teachers, and just understand that it's like the English language, right? So I speak English, but I grew up in America. People who speak English from England, it's the same language, but what did Winston Churchill say? It's two peoples divided by a common language. But there's so many variations of English that to ask what is pure English is a nonsensical question. In the same way, it's a nonsensical question to ask what is the pure Wing Chun, because unless you have a videotape of Mui, then you can't talk to me about that. And even then, I would expect that a reasonable person hundreds of years ago would understand that the thing that they came up with would be something that could benefit from growth and adaptation over the decades and centuries. So Wing Chun is a living thing, not a museum piece. And let's keep it alive and growing and vital.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. Outstanding words. Thank you so much, Sifu Jim. And if you're looking to practice Wing Chun, I'm gonna give Sifu Jim's information in the description of the video. You can go ahead and click over there. Go to the website at White Tiger School. You're gonna find all the information.
Yeah, get in touch with me via White Tiger School. And currently, the Wing Chun class schedule is a little diminished post-COVID, but we have Wing Chun classes on Tuesday and Wednesday evenings and Saturdays at noon. So if you're in Los Angeles, even if you're just in town for a few days, I've had people come in from, whatever place. And if you live close and you want to train on an ongoing basis, love to have you in. But visitors are always welcome, even if you're just in town for a day or two.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sifu Jim, one more time. Thank you for watching our podcast. Give us a thumbs up, a comment, and I'll see you in the next episode of Kung Fu Talk. Thank you very much.
All right.